Hey guys, welcome to Whitney's Watchlist. Today I'm reviewing The Sound of Silence, starring Peter Sarsgaard and Rashida Jones. I went to go see this movie at IFC Center. I've actually never been there, which is kind of crazy for me to have lived in the New York area this long and not seen a film there. So it's a theater that mostly caters to independent films. So it was a really cool experience. I mean, it wasn't anything crazy. It wasn't like a super special, spectacular theater, but anyway, it's not important. So the film starts with like this really old like clips of like them testing like decibels, I think in Times Square or something like that. And already you're like intrigued and you're drawn into the movie. The movie itself was really interesting. And Peter Sarsgaard's acting was just like incredible. It was just phenomenal. And so was Rashida Jones's acting. I mean, it was pretty good. Again, one of the reasons why I was excited to see this was because I feel like we never really see her in this kind of like depressed type character. And I think she did a really good job. I mean, I really believed it. So I was actually lucky enough to attend a showing that had a Q&A right afterwards with the director, Peter Sarsgaard, and the writer. And it was nice being able to kind of get some insight into certain decisions and certain choices and how long they were prepping and all of that, which was apparently a very long time. And I think they got some funding from Dolby, which I think really helped get like the final kicker they needed to get this project completed. I really like this idea that they played with, you know, that this guy tunes home. This character studied music theory and he kind of just ends up kind of tuning these people's houses, finding like things that are wrong with people's house. It could be like a radio, it could be a toaster or whatever, that is subconsciously adding to these people's anxiety, depression, what have you. And a lot of his patients claim to, if I could call them patients, a lot of his clients seem to really feel better after they come and visit their home until he has Rashida Jones's character's situation. And this character is just so intelligent. He's just so smart, understands music perfectly, and he's he's definitely obsessive over the different sounds that happen in New York, to the point where the viewer is like genuinely intrigued as to what he's going to discover next, how he's going to solve the problem, which in this case is fixing Rashida Jones's character, Ellen, her problem. You go through the movie and you really kind of go through this journey with this character, really, because he's trying to find validation for his life's work, which is that certain tones relate to certain moods and feelings. You don't really get to it to the end, but this movie is really about how people perceive happiness and how it's different and how there's not one way to perceive happiness. There's a way also of understanding that comes when ultimate silence is finally achieved. And I won't spoil it, but it's achieved to where people finally understand Peter's character and as to why this idea of pure silence is just kind of bliss for him, and kind of understanding that that's his source of happiness without him even really kind of like knowing it. All in all, I feel like this movie was interesting because of how technical it was, and you really got to go into the world of this guy and understand how he interprets sound, how he finds flat notes and all that, and how it relates to the world around him. I thought that was really interesting. The movie overall, I will rate as a you can wait. I hate to say this because it's an independent film, but like, you know, if you want to see it, of course, I always say it, go see it. But it was just an interesting watch. It wasn't something that was like amazing, something I would be talking about forever. It was like, oh, okay, that was cool. That was cute. Cool. And then I'm like gonna go on with my life. I mean, I guess the film was pretty much what I was expecting. I wasn't expecting a wow factor. I really was just going to see the movie because it was an interesting topic. So if you're interested in the topic and you're interested into music and how that could relate to tuning houses, I think you should check it out. But otherwise, you're not missing a lot.
Ben Nabors. I didn't know if we were doing stage down there. I didn't know if this is too much. Feeling it out. I'm going to start with you, Michael, and let's talk a little bit about how you fine-tuned the script and came up with the idea. That's the only sound pun I have so far, so
It's a good one. I haven't put that one
start.
yet today. You know, it's this, we've been talking a lot about kind of the origins of the script a lot today and things. Ben and I have been reminiscing, but it started for me in 2011 when Ben sent me a document in an email that I pulled it up the other day. The subject was called Palimpsest, which was the working title for this feature for a long time. And it contained this character called the house tuner, and I was really intrigued by that right away. And Ben had kind of mapped out this guy with an odd job in New York, and it did a lot of things, but we decided we wanted to adapt that into a short film. And then we made that short film in 2013, and it played at Sundance, and a lot of people kind of asked us if house tuning was real, and we realized we wanted to expand that idea a little bit. And then we spent the next 5+ years, I suppose, really taking our time and waiting for people to want to pay for this.
So thank you guys for coming out and supporting this, and tell your friends, please. It's going to be a perfect weekend for it. Ben, let's talk to you a little bit about the house tuner. Where did that concept come from? Is that something you heard of or just concocted?
I was living in New York. I think a lot of people can relate to steam heat. It has a particular sound about it. From the pipes up from the basement to the radiator and its individual squeal, which kind of makes a cameo in the film.
Who here knows what he's talking about as far as,
here we
go.
steam
That's a good
heat.
percentage.
Steam heat is a special New York experience. I was living in a very noisy apartment in Washington Heights with a lot of ranchero music in the daytime, steam heat at night, and I was going a little crazy. And at the same time, I had a subscription to the family circle seats at the Met, way up the top, where you more listen than you hear, and was thinking a lot about the emotional influence of sound, and how crazy my apartment was making me feel, and thinking if there was a service to solve that problem, which initially kind of kickstarted.
So you created a job, basically.
I think New York is a place where these jobs can exist. You know, a lot of other people live here, a lot of anxieties, and a little bit of disposable income to put towards this kind of profession. So yes.
Absolutely, I completely believe that. Peter, tell me about what you thought of the character when you first read the script.
I thought it was like the craziest thing I've ever read. I mean,
That's saying a lot for...
Yeah, I really liked, to me it felt like a little bit of a love letter to the city that I've lived in for a long time, in spite of the fact that it's critical of it in some ways. I think if you live here, you come to terms with the noise on some level, and your own anxiety on some level. And maybe we're all here because we have a surplus of anxiety. And we need to be in a noisy place. If we lived in a quiet place, we go completely nuts. So the noise is just what's like the birch on the back sort of thing. I was attracted to the tone of the movie, I guess. I read so many things that are very similar in terms of just the tone. And I thought, this is very original. Like, I was sort of laughing, I sort of felt sad, and then I kept wanting there to be some romantic something in the movie, and just this small little connection with another person just became this large event, which I thought, yeah, that's enough, that's good, He makes contact.
No, it's perfect, and I think what I also love is the way that Peter plays him. Obviously he's taking it very seriously as a character would, but you start to believe everything he's saying. And that first little bit of found footage you guys have there, how'd you guys find that? That was perfect.
Yeah, we found that early in the research, and I always knew I wanted to put it in the movie. I knew we weren't making a documentary, but I was like, this somehow just feels like our world. And they're called the Noise Abatement Commission. That clip is from 1929. It was one of these old Fox movie tone newsreels that they used to play before movies. And it's just this incredible documentary footage, and I love that, there's these kind of scientists, sound scientists, nearly 100 years ago who were dressed very well, took their jobs very seriously. It didn't seem so different that, 100 years later, you could have a guy, like Peter Lucian show up at your door in a blazer and a briefcase, and you would take him seriously, even though he's talking about your toaster and microwave and things like that.
The cure for it now seems to be AirPods. And we all just walk around in our own little sound
Bring
tracks.
the mic up a little bit, Peter.
Our little podcast. I'm a theater actor.
Throw the mic away. Whatever you feel like.
I don't like the sound of my voice through a microphone. And no, I do see everyone, just the way that we've all come to deal with it is that, right? Like you were on the subway, and the subway's actually a very quiet place, except for the train, because very few people are having conversations. And I see that the city is headed that way now, right? Or like all of us are headed that way, where we're all just in our little bubble worlds, colored by whatever we've got going on in here.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, the sound on top of sound too. Now we have the new noise cancellation. You just run into somebody who's in their own absolute world. Did this feel, when you were living with this character, and then with the character, when you guys were writing him, did you start to become a little more attuned to sound? Did you start thinking about it more than you did before?
I think Michael and I keep a pretty tight sound regiment in our households. I got a couple sound conditioners in my home. Michael does too. Yeah, maybe since we started the project, we live in much quieter places. We were in Greenpoint for a long time. It was a pretty noisy stretch. Now I think it's gotten quieter for us.
Yeah, I realized, like I guess Ellen's character, I lived in the same apartment for 10 years, and I was thinking of this. I don't know if this was subconscious, but during the edit of this movie, I moved for the first time, and I moved my office below my apartment. So I also work in a like Peter's character in a basement now. I keep the fallout shelter sign, the prop on my wall, to just remind myself that I've cut myself off from the world in a way. But there's something about silence and quietness that is I find really important to working, and I think that's what we liked about this character, that is solving people's problems and going to people's homes and connecting with them, but is ironically cut off. And I thought like the best place that someone can be cut off in a place like Manhattan but still operate in the city is below, in a subterranean environment where you can have somewhat control of the sound. It's not completely devoid of noise, but there's something kind of like womb-like and nice about being able to send Peter down into his little subchamber every night.
I do think we also sort of blame a lot of our anxieties and inner turmoil on external influences, whether it be sound or black mold or whatever your particular idea is. And I do think that one of the interesting things about the film to me was it felt like a very modern thing. Like I know so many people who have like microplasma, Gulf War syndrome, Epstein-Barr, toxicity to black mold and other environmental influences, sound, and I do think all of those things are obviously real, but I also think that the place really to look, obviously, is not at what that is doing to you this way. It's what's going on inside of you. And I thought that was what the movie was ostensibly getting at. Yeah.
No, well said. I think I completely see that in the end of the film, where he's sort of in this turmoil. You start to hear the dissonance in the tones that he's playing, and then he has that connection, like you were mentioning, Peter, and that the sound comes in.
I mean, I have a young violinist and oboe player in my house. My youngest, yeah, and I'm happy.
Next on our drums. I'm going to throw to you guys pretty soon. If you guys have any questions, just throw up your hands. But I'm going to start with, I just want to mention the rest of the cast: Rashida, Alex Popovsky, all these people. How did you sort of find these people? Were they your dream gets, or how did you fill out the roster?
Yeah, well, I mean, it all started with this gentleman. He was my dream role from the beginning. So it was a big kind of eclectic cast, but it started with Peter, and him and I were talking about the movie a year before we were making it, a year before we had any money, and I'm glad he stuck with it.
I recorded the whole movie. That's true.
Yeah.
I went in and read the whole thing so you could listen to it.
Right. Yeah, I had this idea that if I didn't have anything else, I just wanted to at least have a podcast version of the movie.
I feel like people want to hear that too, right? Is that a bonus extra on a DVD or something like that?
Sounds good as a radio drama.
The movie was better, yeah.
Okay, I saw the start of some hands going up, so if you guys have any questions, just throw it up. Okay, yeah, right there.
In the first scene with the assistant that came in to the workroom, he notices an anomaly, and I kind of, as a scientist, you want to focus on that, and that's what might explode the whole thing. Was that just a throwaway thing, or is that really the key to understanding something profound here?
Yeah, the anomaly, I wonder, The anomaly that Peter has on the map is Ellen's apartment, the Rashida Jones character, who puts a red pin in, so suddenly that map, that pattern of Manhattan looks astray.
Right, okay.
I don't know that I'm like the best scientist, also. So like an anomaly for another scientist might be an opportunity. For me, it's a thing that messes up my thing, my scheme.
I think scientists should traditionally look for things that don't adhere to their theories to test them. But Peter's problem is that he's looking for things that confirm his theory,
Yeah, right.
and he's operating alone. But I think you got that. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
I love the notes that you guys put into the different thing, the microwave is a B flat, that sort of thing. Where'd you guys come up with those notes, or those sort of just picked out something from the skills?
I mean, it's incredibly subjective. I think we found a lot of, we had a couple sources that Ben and I were looking at early on, and they were more kind of like poetic interpretations of Western musical scales. And but at the end of the day, we just kind of used them for inspiration, but we romanticized everything. I mean, we talked about the city the way we feel. At one point, Ben and I created our own map, and I guess it was technically like a spreadsheet at some point, where we cataloged, what each neighborhood was going to sound like if that did appear on the map, and that helped the art department kind of.
Unless you have a perfect pitch, it's all relative. Also, right?
Yeah.
I mean, people argue about what the standard A should be. Is it a 440A? Is it a 442A? How many hertz are you going at? I don't have an ear that's that good. And, for me, I'm very musical. I've been involved with music and played different instruments my whole life. My kids play music. But, I actually had here's a short story. I had the opportunity to play with Ornette Coleman before he died at his house. And it was like kind of cosmic, because he asked me to play an instrument that I don't play, which is the drums. But he was like, everybody plays the drums, you can play the drums. And he was saying that sound, music, all of it is something that exists without us. It doesn't need us. It's happening all the time in whatever disorganized or organized way it's going on in life. And we can all just choose to participate in it. And this cacophony, or whatever you call it, is all part of the orchestration, whether a jackhammer's making it or a songbird is making it, and you can just sort of accept it that way, which I thought was a nice way to get through New York City on a Monday morning.
I would remember that, guys. That was beautiful. That's a beautiful thing to impart. Thank you very much. Does anybody else have any questions? We have another one right here.
The journey for the actor, how did you develop the character, and do you have any Easter eggs that funny little quirks that you worked on?
I was really into my gear. I got really into my stuff. I remember that was one of the things that was really important to me. Before we started, I said, I want everything laid out. I don't want there to be a single scene where I'm fudging the way something works. What does this do? How does it work? I wanted all the physical stuff to be like stuff I knew, my tools laid out how I liked them. It's very important to me to treat this not only seriously, but specifically, and with any kind of generalization, this would have just been completely, to me, garbage, I needed to really listen for those notes, and really find the place that was making them, I didn't think very much about what I was feeling at all. I was against the rules, unless it somehow happened. I would say that one of the places in the movie where I actually felt something for the first time as we were filming was when I went to go talk to my idol, the woman who was giving the lecture. And I was completely surprised that day. I remember we were filming, and I hadn't, it wasn't like this is some big scene where I have something happen to me. I went up, I'm talking to my idol, does she remember me? She doesn't remember me. Oh, she does remember me. She thinks I'm an idiot, And just how horrible that felt to be nothing, But I got over that, went on to the next scene, and just to play somebody who just doesn't spend a lot of time checking out what's going on inside of them, spends a lot of time with their gear.
Yeah, I remember you didn't want to get a manicure, which I loved before the movie, so you could keep your fingernails dirty. You're a guy who worked with tools.
He's staying in character. He's taking that with him. The tuning forks were great too. I love the tuning forks when they were hit. Any other question right here? Compliments are welcome, people. If you just want to shout out compliments, that's great too.
that's a.
Yeah, and then also because it was really fun to watch like everyone do the work and do the tools, and then we get really excited talking about Bach and like seeing you like that. And then like, yeah, I totally want to see you in the office. So the fact that you were in the office and you're like, okay, I'm good. You know, so that was really great.
And Bach is really good. Check him out.
Ocean right there. I like it. Good
It's
question.
hard to get rhapsodic about him.
Great compliments. Question right there.
How long did the sound design take?
Well, we were fortunate we started in the script phase, and we got some support from Dolby, which is very helpful because we're a very small, low budget movie, and usually there's not usually any room left over in a budget, or the line item is very small for sound. So we were able to get some extra padding there, which was good. And then we were working with sound designers before we started shooting. They were giving us ideas and actually making us kind of temp beds that we used during production and then in the edit. And then once we wrapped picture, I think we mixed in this technology called Dolby Atmos, which was also very luxurious for a film of our size. And we had a stage for the better part of two months.
Weeks.
Or
2 weeks on the stage.
2 weeks on the stage, but the process was much more involved. And we were also composing at the same time, which normally also happens in 2 different sections, but I wanted those departments to be able to have a dialogue. Our composer was on the West Coast, we were here in New York, but I say, you know, that score and sound design should be synonymous, and I really like when those things can complement each other. We obviously play with that in certain scenes, you know, and heighten it that way, but I really like getting into sound, and it's important to have time to do it, to experiment and make mistakes along the way too.
Yeah, to piggyback off that, I mean, not to toy with the title too much, but I really enjoyed the moments of the silence, the quiet, that you're allowed to actually consider what Peter's character was saying and sort of believe it and actually, oh yeah, apply it to your own life. Was that all scripted in? You know, Peter, are you excited by the prospect of that kind of silence in a scene or a moment before the dialogue starts?
Whenever I'm not talking, I'm super happy. That's true. I remember I was going to work with this director, and he had seen me play Hamlet, and he came backstage afterwards and he offered me a job, and he said, I just really loved it when you weren't talking. I guess that's what I'm particularly good at. So I do sort of relish those things, obviously, especially in film where it's people go to watch movies, not really like listen to what you're saying. And yes, so much happens there. I actually love it when an actor goes up on their lines. I always think that's just like a massive opportunity because the anxiety comes, it's really quiet, everybody's staring at each other, and it's really heightened, and then what's going to happen next? You know? So, plenty of that in this, I'm sure, too.
Definitely. Michael and Ben, you know, were you guys considering those pauses, those silences in the script?
I mean, sound in general was a big component of the script. I think there are conventions for writing shots into traditional screenwriting formats, but there's not a lot of convention for writing sound. And Michael and I developed our own little process for making the sound a recurring character. The sound of Peter's ears ringing, which is very progressive through the entire course of the film. That was like a thread that became fatter and fatter for the character, but then the other sounds that are driving him. But I feel like the question about silence, I think that was something that Michael and the sound design team really discovered in post, that to really convey the experience Peter was having, in some degree, it was about taking as much away and focusing on 1 or 2 things. So that became very impressive for the audience or for Peter. So maybe not overwhelming us with sound, but in Peter's like hyper attention, focusing on just a few things that were difficult for him to deal with.
Yeah, we wanted sound to be, we referred to sound as this kind of invisible character a lot when we were shooting, but to what Ben was saying, I think, you know, I made a mistake early on, or, you know, like sometimes it's necessary to make mistakes, but, you know, the scene where Peter goes to the office, I thought, well, he's going to be hearing this kind of cacophony of cotton machines and water gurgling in a machine and those sort of things. And, you know, you play it back and it just sounds cliche, and I've heard this, but then I started talking, we had this sound scientist contact at Dolby who also suffers from this kind of heightened hearing, tinnitus sort of disorder. And she describes when you hear a lot of noise, it actually just becomes this kind of high-pitched ringing, you know, it filters out. So as soon as we got that kind of bug in our head, then we threw out everything we did before and then just brought that up in the sound mix, and then suddenly it's what Ben said, it's like taking away suddenly became more and more interesting, I think. And
Is this the woman who's kind of oppressed by her perfect pitch?
yeah, this is Poppy Crumb, Dr. Dolby scientist.
Very, very interesting person too.
It sounds fascinating. We have time for one last question. The woman in the back went first, so sorry, I have to give it to.
That was incredibly beautiful. Thank you so much for that film. You're talking about the sound in the film as a character, and when the lights went out in the city and there was a power outage in the rain, and you chose for the city to be silent, that moment sort of struck me because I think of that as potentially a very loud moment, maybe in New York City, but the silence and the rain, and I really wonder from your perspective, what was the rain in that moment? What character was the rain in that moment coming down on the city?
Yeah, for anybody who didn't hear, it's about the power outage and the choice of not having the absence of sound. You know, I mean, that was always this kind of big, I refer to that whole scene now as like Peter's taking a hot shower. You know, he's able to kind of like cleanse for the first time in this movie, and it's less about like the atmospheric elements and more about the fact that this, you know, his greatest ability, being able to hear, is also his downfall, all of the electricity. I love the idea that in a blackout, you know, which we've all witnessed if you've lived in New York long enough, happens, and it seems otherworldly, it seems like this kind of film noir thing, but that's how they actually look. And I love the idea of when the absence of all this like electronic buzzing that's around you all the time in the city. For Peter, that's the first time, you know, the only thing we rose in that scene in terms of sound was his breath, his like breath of relief. And the only thing I wanted to put on top of that was the sound of Clara Rockmore playing the theremin, which is also that kind of otherworldly, beautiful sound. And it just felt right. I guess my editor who came on, you know, described that scene as just like doing an honest edit of it, and I really liked that. And we arrived there, but it just felt right for the moment.
The only person that's ever successfully played the theremin. I mean, if you go and listen to the theremins, I have one in my house. It's awesome.
Well, that was a great last question. Thanks so much for coming out, guys. Tell your friends. The Sound of Silence here in IFC Center. Thanks so much for being here, guys. Michael, Peter, Ben.
Check out this video, that video, or go ahead and subscribe. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye.